hear me. O Lord, I will keep thy statutes. I cried unto thee, save me, and I shall keep thy testimonies. I prevented the dawning of the morning. I cried, I hoped in thy word. Mine eyes prevent the night watches, that I might meditate in thy word. Hear my voice according to thy loving kindness, O Lord. Quicken me according to thy judgment. They draw nigh that follow after mischief.
Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing in the book of Hosea, chapter 10. So I didn't have the text ready for some reason. There we go. Hosea chapter 10, verse 8. We're talking about, again, the high places of Aven, or Beth Aven. Now, Aven, if you look that up, you might get a lot of different meanings behind it. Or they'll say it's the house of idolatry, house of wickedness. That's an extension of the meaning. The root idea is vanity, or that which is empty or fruitless. Like if you go back and you look at at least that's, what they say in one dictionary. Sometimes, you're only as authoritative as your source. And, so, take that with whatever grain of salt you want. But the point is, it had been known as the house of God. And now is a place of wickedness, of emptiness, of not God, of something else, something that's been substituted, which is of negative value. The root meaning, in according to Strong's Concordance, had to do with the idea of panting. And so the idea was to exert oneself in vain exertion. And I like that as a contrast to God. The house of God is fruitful, where your labors are rewarded, where your exertions are not in vain. We labor not in vain. Our faith is not in vain. It's from that's the Apostle Paul, but whatever, it's a New Testament quote. And but now we have the house of vanity, of vainness, and that's because of the idolatry practiced there. But the idea that those things are, yes, they are wicked, but as Solomon said in Ecclesiastes, if we assume he is the author, there's an evil under the sun. There's a man who, works all his life to gain riches, but that doesn't have the power to enjoy it, and he just loses it all. That vain exertion is an evil. Well, it's part of the evil of the world, in the sense of like that. Like I said, I was talking about this yesterday. I forget the exact nature of the analogy I used. But basically, where it talked about Israel feeding himself. And how just feeding yourself is kind of ultimately vain. I'm not saying, people can have fulfilling lives in the world. Even, not believing in God, they're going to have fulfilling lives in the world. But it's not going to be through just feeding yourself. And you can see this even in unbelievers. They attempt to do great things to leave a legacy, something that's going to last beyond their existence. Because if our existence is entirely consumed merely with feeding ourselves, and I mean that not just like food, I mean that in just consumption. Consuming entertainment, clothing, goods, and like obtaining things to temporarily please ourselves, to feed ourselves, to clothe ourselves, to give ourselves pleasure. That is an ultimately vain and empty life. And in a sense, because it is such a waste of life, and life is something so precious, it is wicked. It is wicked. And then that, idolatry is honoring that which is not God, as though it were. It is also wicked. And Bethel, the house of God, became the house of wickedness or vanity. House of emptiness would be a good way to put it. Empty. I like that, anyways. House of emptiness. Not just of God isn't there, but of what is there. There are things there, but the things that are there are worthless. And in fact, they are negative value because they take. Things you pour your efforts into that have no ultimate value. And that's something, if you think about, putting your efforts into empty things. If you really think about how, the hamster on the wheel, it's kind of a depressing thought. You think about it. It's like you like to think your efforts are to some end. But the end of just feeding ourselves and consuming things is a very shallow end, and is in itself another form of vanity. The high places also of Aven, the sin of Israel, shall be destroyed. High places, because they always put their idols on little high places, upon every, under every green tree and on every high hill in the land. There'd be a high hill in the land, and you'd find an idol's altar there. That's how crazy it got. That's how it was in a lot of places. It's what humans did. Is they see like a nice high place. It's like, well, that must be the place. That's the place to honor some God. And they would build altars there. The thorn and the thistle shall come up upon their altars. I say come up on their altars. And they shall say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. That's an old prophecy. Hosea is one of the oldest prophets. I think Amos being the oldest, or Jonah and Amos. But Hosea is definitely, I should say, of the latter prophets, he is one of the first. Many of the books of the Bible you would look into and say, the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, with the names, all the ones tagged with the name of a prophet. Like, of all those prophets, he was one of the early ones. Like I said, I think it's Jonah, Amos. I think Hosea was there. But he was before Isaiah, and Isaiah is another one of the early ones. The ones that prophesied before the coming of the Assyrians. Before the Assyrian captivity, anyways. And, so, he may be one of the first people who have talked about this, but it was probably proverbial. It's the kind of thing people will say. That, when great evil befalls people, maybe you are, maybe you don't know. Well, many people, no doubt, have had, their lives in such a position where they feel like things are so broken. Or they look at you talk about hitting bottom. Sometimes people in life, they hit bottom. They get to the worst possible place. Right? And the desire to just curl up and die. There's other scriptures where it talks about that same desire, where it's like, let me now die. Because it's like, you sometimes come to a point where you feel like everything you've previously done has been in vain. Your efforts are all wasted. You know, you might be looking, or some punishment you don't want to face, some consequences you've boxed yourself in, and you have to either face consequences or die. And the idea of calling to the mountains and hills to fall on us is a picture of that mental state, where you've come to the extremity of one's tolerance for bad things, circumstances coming upon you, and you say, I just want the mountains to bury me so I don't have to face this. And Isaiah uses the same thing, and it comes down even to the book of Revelation, where in chapter 6, in the seals, it says, and the kings of the earth and the great men, and the rich men and the chief captains, and every bondman and every free man. I skipped some men. Whatever, all kinds of men. They hid themselves in the mountains. Hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us in the face of him that sitteth upon the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come. When the day of reckoning comes, it's very natural that people want to avoid it. And so, being buried alive, I mean, and the idea is not to stay alive, but just to hide me and let me die. That when that desire comes upon someone, it's no surprise, in the face of such judgment. We feel like we don't want to sit and endure. I've certainly felt similar things, not, probably not to the extreme that we're talking about here, but where it's like, you build a house, you build things for yourself. You entrap yourself and snare yourself, and it could be sin. It could be bad financial decisions, which could be a sinful sort of thing. Certainly you're missing the mark as far as managing your affairs. You've built yourself like I said, you make your bed, now you have to sleep in it. Well, I don't want to sleep in that bed. I don't like it. I don't want to face that judgment. So the high places where they worship their gods, broken down and destroyed, thorns and thistles coming up upon their altar from lack of attention. People are all going to be taken into captivity. And they shall say to the mountains, cover us, and hills fall on us. They won't want to face the judgment. It's not necessarily like, I don't want to face God, though that can be true, like in the book of Revelation, but just like, I don't want to face what is in store for me as a consequence of my doings. And in some cases, it's not necessarily legitimate. It's like, if you are a Christian, you don't have the option to say like, let me die. You can say it, but it's like not on your menu of choices. It's like you make yourself a bad situation. You have no choice but to go forward and endure it. Like Peter, when he denied the Lord, he went out and wept bitterly. And then Jesus brought it up again, essentially, later on. Which is like, but he didn't bring it up, but he said, Peter, do you love me? And he said, yes, Lord. But he said it 3 times, as if to emphasize, remember those 3 times you denied me? But you think about if he could be said, and Jesus didn't say, "You don't love me." Yeah. Because sometimes we say it to people, we're like, "Oh, you don't love me because you don't do this. If you love me, you do this." It's like, wow, there's such a thing as perfect love. It's like everyone's always like, so you either love or you don't. Either this or you're that. You don't or you do. And life isn't always so simple, at least in human terms. Now, I want to have all love and no non-love, right? You want to be all righteous and no unrighteous, because that is what because if you are even a little unrighteous, it kind of ruins everything. You know what I mean? Though you keep the law, but offend in one point, you're a transgressor. Well, thanks be to God through the grace of our Lord and through the blood of Jesus Christ, we can kind of step over that so that God will deal with us as though we were righteous and will be kindly disposed to us. But it requires us also to cooperate in the sense of to avoid sin. Well, not avoid sin, to not, what I mean? It's like, what do I want to say? To eschew sin is the word I like. To swear it off, to at least want to avoid it, to regret it when it happens, at least feel guilty, at least remember that you're another man's servant and you're not free to do whatever you want. O Israel, thou hast sinned from the days of Gibeah. There they stood. There they stood, the battle in Gibeah against the children of iniquity did not overtake them. I talked about Gibeah. Gibeah was that place where they had committed that horrible rape. And it's I hesitate to call it a rape and murder because I believe she was just raped to death. You know what I mean? It's kind of like hard to, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to take away from that. I don't want to say oh, it was a rape and murder. No, raped to death is, I think, worse. I mean, it's a horrible, you think about that as far as because if I say rape and murder, you might think, oh, they were raped and then they were murdered. Two distinct events. This is one distinct event. Murder by rape. And all the people of Israel, they heard about what was done. And they were incensed. And they were outraged. At this horrible misdeed that had been done in their land. And they went forth to take revenge against the children of iniquity, against the men who had done such an evil thing in their nation. And they could not defeat them. Eventually they did. After they tore their clothes. They wept and repented in sackcloth and ashes because they themselves were sinners. And they wanted to go and punish. It was God's way of saying, I can't tell. I don't know who needs punishing more. The men of Gibeah who raped this woman to death, or you guys. You hypocrites. And then you might say, well, could there be anything worse? It's not. The point is not which was worse, but just that, it goes to the idea of, I heard this recently, this comedian who was getting in trouble for their things they had said several years ago. The comedy they had done that now is not fashionable. Right? It used to be okay to make certain kinds of jokes, and now we have our own version of the outraged police who get outraged at everything and are policing their religious standards on everyone. If you do anything that even smells racist, you might get caught up in it, especially if you're famous. Right? And this person's caught up, and it's like, and she says, oh, it's like everyone wants to cast the first stone. And I thought, that is a very ironic thing for you to say. Because this comedian was one of the most vilely anti-Christian, mocking the faith people on the face of the planet. You know what I mean? A vile anti-Christian comic lamenting, oh, people are, it's like they all want to, because you know what? It's like, yeah, because it's a casting the first stone. It's like that's a direct reference to Jesus. Let him that is without sin cast the first stone. And you think that just by eliminating Christianity, that little bit of wisdom is going to cling. It's not self-evident. What is more self-evident to men is, I am holier than you are. And it's not, I don't have to be perfect to judge you. You know, men think they don't have to be perfect to judge. They can judge from hypocrisy. That's what men think. My lies, my sins, my iniquities are not, because they don't compare. You're so much worse than me. And you're worthy of death. Or will destroy your life, your career. You know, because it gives them pleasure. They feel so righteous. So, you know, like I said, just like when I see all these people, it's like, you know, when I see people talking about, they pick out the worst sinners. And I'm not saying the worst sinners aren't worthy of contempt for the evil they do. They are, but get your own house in order. God does not appreciate the hypocritical, self-righteous judgmentalism of people who also engage in all kinds of sin. Because he is perfect. And he sees himself as holier than all of us. And our sort of righteously, I would never do such a thing. It's like, I don't know. You certainly are the kind of person who self-righteously sits in judgment of others when you yourself are wicked to the core. You know. And so they cast out Christianity from society, or they degrade it and mock it in public. And then they marvel when the young people no longer think there's something, you know, maybe I shouldn't cast the first stone because I got to set my own house in order first. You know, it's when like that guy like Jordan Peterson, he tells people, oh, you know, clean your room, which is a metaphor for get your own life in order before you set out to fix the world or to judge the world even, right? And it's a set your own house in order. It's a Christian idea, just given a new spin so people don't freak out because everyone hates Christianity. Or at least in popular parlance, it's not too cool. It's just not anymore, you know. And it was uncool in the 90s. Now it's just simply despised, to tell you the truth. Certainly in the world of the external culture. Though, you know, there are some exceptions, I suppose, for some people. I'm just thinking about, I think about weird, odd places where, I guess if you have the right leftist credentials, you can be religious in some capacity as long as you don't take it too seriously. So as people actually that's what they like, is they like people who are religious that don't take it too seriously. They can tolerate that. I feel the same way about atheism, you know, as long as they're not too serious about it. All right. So they were sinners he's not talking about the Gibeonites, or Gibeon, the Gibeahites, who had done this deed, as horrible as it is. But of the men of the rest of Israel, who were all zealous to punish the wicked sinners of Gibeah. And they went to battle against them and did not prevail. I mean, thousands of men died. For their hypocrisy. It is in my desire that I should chastise them, and the people shall be gathered against them, when they shall bind themselves in their two furrows. And Ephraim and is an heifer that is taught, and loveth to tread out the corn. But I passed over upon her fair neck. I will make Ephraim to ride, Judah shall plow, and Jacob shall break his clods. Okay. That's kind of weird, right? Not weird, it's just completely unintelligible since I don't know anything about agriculture. Actually, I know a little bit about it, mostly from the Bible. But honestly, I could read this to a farmer and he'd be like, what are you talking about? Because it's like, Ephraim shall jump in the tractor and use the backhoe or leap on the harvester and the combine, and they don't use animals for plowing ever. Okay, so God is saying here, this is the main point here, and this will be help it be easy to understand, is that I want to chastise them. So we can go there and think, okay, God wants to chastise them. That's the theme, right? Chastisement is supposed to be that which is the correction given to a child. Like to chastise your children. You could call it honestly, that's what it is in English. That's how I always take it. I want to check here. Did I just... Oh, I guess when I had my... Did I do that? Yeah, I did. I had my window open, but then I lost it. I didn't keep it open. Meaning, before I started studying, I just closed everything down. All right. Here we go into the world of Bible Hub. So, I just want to look up the word chastise. Because I'm like, what if it just means punish? And I'm going on about chastisement. And I'm like, that's how we take it in our vernacular. Vasar, to discipline, chasten, admonish. I don't read the Hebrew words as much as I do the Greek ones. Because the Greek ones actually, a lot of times, they make sense because we have English words that derive from them. Whereas the Hebrew, we have 0 words that derive from them just about. Well, amen, and another, there are a few Hebrew words that derive from, I can say, oh, that's hallelujah. So, there's not much here. Chastise, the quick definition that comes up, it says, yasar, to discipline, chasten, admonish. So, it does mean like chastise to, oh, don't do that, Paul. I almost went to my YouTube page, and I might have crossed the streams, which I don't like to do. Because I feel I have a bad enough connection as it is. If I start streaming it back to myself, it's only going to make things worse. Okay, it is in my desire that I should chastise them, and the people shall be gathered against them. Okay. So chastisement is not like the punishment of criminals, but of the correction given a son. The discipline offered someone who you want to change their behavior. The idea is not purely punitive, but reformative, The idea is not to punish so much as to... it is a punishment, but the idea is not purely vindictive punishment, but rather corrective. And even, and the reason we call, like, jail and prison, we call it corrections, because of Christian ideas of that these should be places where we reform criminals, because they thought, they didn't want to just punish people. They thought, what's the point of this incarceration? They come out there worse than they were when they go in. I still haven't figured it out, because you can't just let people do stuff. But you can't just like separately house each of them or just sort them into. I mean, I guess they have minimum security, and you're probably less to become a hardened criminal if you've spent some time in a minimum security prison. I suppose you might learn something about white collar crime or other non-violent offenses. I don't know. If you commit fraud, you might meet other fraudsters and learn from their mistakes and share your tricks and whatever. I don't know. The point is not to make them worse criminals, but to make them better people, and they haven't figured that out yet. And I don't have any advice, because I always think that discipline kind of got to start young. At least for me. I mean, I know how to instill discipline in a young child. And I don't even mean. Well, I use physical means, but not physical. Not like you don't have to hit your kid necessarily. I mean, eventually you might have to, because I don't know. Some people say you never do. I mean hit by strike. I mean a spanking on the bottom, a slap to the bottom, a little sting. Then your biggest, one of your toughest muscle groups in your body is in your bottom, and it's also nicely padded. It's a very unlikely place. I've never punished my children by giving them anything anywhere else. Okay, let me just put that. But when I mean physical means, I mean like restraint, restraining them in some way. Not with a straitjacket or anything weird like that. I mean like holding them down to brush their teeth. I do say that because it worked for me. By the time they were 2, they would heed their father. I don't know. Maybe it's not the be-all, end-all answer to everything. There's more to it than that, but this is not going to get into that. I want to interpret this verse before the whole day slips away on me. So, so the people shall be gathered against them, meaning their enemies, when they shall bind themselves in their 2 furrows. What the heck does that mean? That is something I should have left the other translation out. I just want to see. It's the whole idea of. I know the next verse is part of the key to understanding that. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the Bible. I mean, not the Bible collection. I'm going to bring up the Bible Hub again. Because, I don't know. I'm going to spend a moment here. Let's look at some different translations of this verse and see what we get. I think, well, the reason I do this way is because I said let's start with just go right into the Devil's translation. Interesting. See, this is the Devil's translation. I was like, since the days of Gibeah you have sinned, Israel. There you have remained. Will not war overtake the evildoers in Gibeah? I see the point there, that translation. But it's not what happened. I mean, I don't know. That's not how it went. I mean, eventually they were killed. But first the men, I don't know. I don't like it. Don't like it. When I please, I will punish them. Nations shall be gathered against them to put them in bonds for their double sins. Ah, interesting. Now, see, there you go. That's where it shows you. This NIV is not a translation. Because they interpreted for you. I mean, which is fine. I don't mind consulting it, saying because this gives me an instant interpretation without having to go through some sort of commentary. But they're definitely interpreting here. Just like they did here. This is a severe, there are no question marks in the Bible, in the Old Testament. Didn't exist. There are no vowels in the Old Testament. So, I mean, far be it from, But I mean, if you look at other modern translations, they're not going to have that there. You know, I'll look at like the New American Standard. It's like I'm not going to get like, you know, it went similar. The people should be. Let me see. They went with the same question here. Interesting. Because there's a negative. When there's a negative in there, you can, you know, read it in the voice of a question. I guess I don't like it as a statement. I guess well, because in my mind, because here's the thought. They might think like, yeah, we're idolaters, but we're the children of God. We're Jehovah is our God, our primary God, anyways. We're not as bad as the Assyrians. I thought we had some verses in previous chapters where that sentiment came out, where they thought of themselves as, you know, hey, nothing's going to happen to us. We're the people of God. You know, anything, you know, and in fact, that is what I'm going to stick with. I like the King James translation. I don't like them trying to alter that so that it makes more sense, because they haven't really understood what it's saying. So a lot of times these translations feed off each other. I'm just curious about, and there they said that double guilt. And I just want to say, does anybody bother to just leave it the way it is? Yeah, interesting. When is my desire will chastise them, people shall be gathered against them, and they should, when they are bound in their two transgressions. So everyone's convinced that those furrows are their transgressions. Now, they could be right. And we're certainly going to look at it as if that is a possible interpretation, you know? Everyone seems to think, now, but like I said, it's like, that's fine. Thank you for the help, modern translators, in interpreting this, but we're interpreting it, right? And maybe they're right. They bind themselves in their two furrows. Now, here's the way I look at it. A furrow is when you plow the little ditch you make, right? And I've done a bit of plowing. Not exactly. No, I haven't done any plowing. What I've done is rototilling, which is a little machine. Okay, but you can get, but it's a lot like a wheel rut. You know what I mean? A wheel rut. And what did we say? What's our idiom? You get in a rut. Right? I'm in a rut. Stuck in the same old. I'm in a rut. Right? And it refers to a wheel rut, where you get, like, if you ever I've ever driven down like a dirt road. We have very well maintained roads here. Thank you, Carroll County. We don't get wheel ruts, but some places they do. And a wheel rut is where you have a place where two wheels have rolled, and it's become like carved out. Now, especially when you used to have those narrow wheels they used to have on wagons, you get the ruts would get pretty narrow. And it's hard to get out of a rut. Right? You get in a rut, the tendency is to stay there. And that's what these furrows are. It's like two ruts they're stuck in. They're plowing and they're bound up in the furrow. Meaning they've been, and he furthers this analogy in the next verse. He's saying he's a heifer that is taught and loves to tread out the corn. This is a similar situation. They're used to a certain way. You know what I mean? So I don't like them taking this analogy away from us in the modern translations. I feel like, how dare you? How can anyone teach the Bible from an NIV translation? They translate furrow sin. I don't think that, unless the word means sin, let's go look back. Okay. I want to go back to King James. I'm just going back to Bible Hub really quick. I wish they hadn't made the text blue, because, man, it makes it hard for me to read. 2 furrows. Huh. Interesting. Is that really what that word means? Because it says it means an eye. Lift up your eye. Is this just they've misplaced it? Okay. I'm just looking at all these definitions. I'm like, okay, where's the furrow? Yeah. See, like, it says a primitive word, an eye. By analogy, a fountain as the eye of the landscape. Affliction, outward appearance. And then they have a bunch of stuff. And where does it say? But here's the thing. Okay. Furrow from the margin. I guess because here's the thing. I see where they translate it. Iniquity, again, maybe they think Aven, and maybe there's a reason they translate it otherwise. Okay? Because the word is not, I'm like, that's an unusual word to translate furrow. But it is like, I guess you could say, like an opening in the ground, just like the eye is an opening in the body. Right? So I don't know. It says, I looked in the Strongs. Let me show you real quick what I saw that I thought was interesting. I want to show you this just so you understand. So this is an important part of like studying the, where you get. A lot of times I don't deal always in certainty. Here's in a Strong's Concordance, they'll give you a definition. Affliction, outward appearance, before, think best, color, conceit, be content. Oh, those are the ways it's. Here's the definition. Probably a primitive word, an eye. Literally or figuratively. By analogy, a fountain as the eye of the landscape. It's certainly used of that. And then what follows, there's this dash. And everything after this is not a definition, but it is how in the King James the word is translated. So it's translated in these ways. Affliction, outward appearance, before, think best, color, conceit, plus be content. So again, I don't know what the plus be content. Countenance, plus displease. Meaning it's used with another word to mean displease, I suppose. Eye or eyebrow, sight, face, favor, fountain, furrow, from the margin. So there's some sort of marginal reading. I think what happened is it says ayin, the word is I. In the margin, there's a different word, and they're like furrow. And then they took that in, I guess. And I don't know. All it says is like that's where they got it from. So why a furrow? Okay. I like the furrow thing, though, honestly. It's like, they bind them. Because I guess the reason they thought... Here's the thing, those marginal readings go back pretty ancient often, and so it could be right. So, I don't want to die on this hill. I was going real well there, okay? Now I'm like, okay, it's a marginal reading. When we say something's marginal, what we say, right? I mean, that's, like, I don't know, he's marginally good. It means someone is at the margin. They're not quite there. And something in the margin of the text is also not quite there. So, but that's also, the word means eye. They shall bind themselves in their two eyes. Why is that not the translation? I don't know. Must be a good reason. Because, I mean, everyone has two eyes. It seems like it makes sense. You know? It also mentions, it's in my desire that I should chastise them. I have my eyes on, I want to chastise them. And the people are gathered against them when they shall bind themselves in their two eyes. I mean, what they got their eyes fixed on? I don't know. I still like the idea of being in a rut. Because it fits in. We're just going to pass on that. We'll just go to the next verse because I can still get the same. Here's the thing. I don't have to be right to be right. You know what I mean? I can preach the truth without knowing everything. As Ephraim is an heifer that is taught and loveth to tread out the corn. Right? And Ephraim is as a heifer that is taught. Meaning, he's taught to tread out the corn. Meaning, it has a job that it likes to do. What does it mean? It treads out the corn. It means it's operating in the part where because there's a saying in the law, and Paul quotes it in the New Testament, "Thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treads the corn." Because the animal that works in the treading out the corn, meaning the grinding of the corn, he uses it as an analogy of being a servant worthy of its hire. He's working in grinding up the grain and should not be prevented from eating some of it. It was actually a commandment in the law. There's a lot of like anti-animal cruelty law because it was like, hey, let him eat. He's working in that capacity. He should eat in that capacity. I mean, it was considered bad form. Don't muzzle the ox that treads the corn. It's like wrong, right? But so like an animal that, let's say, is accustomed to doing that work, loves that work. You know what I mean? It's like, I've done a lot of different jobs, right? And some jobs you like better than others, right? Some are more enjoyable. I remember when I was, one of my very first job was working at a retirement home. And I worked in the kitchen. And I was a waiter and a busboy, but I also worked in the kitchen. Boy, one of the things I liked doing was getting those desserts ready. They're this I've never been. This was a big retirement community, and the kitchen was the biggest kitchen I've ever been. It's funny at the time I didn't know it, but I've never been in a bigger kitchen, just a big kitchen, and they had a huge freezer. I just remember it was just you walk in and it was like to the ceiling stacked with stuff. They had like a big ladder in there. It was big place. And in the freezer there was just like cakes, frozen cakes, German chocolate cake, whatever, all these different cakes. Man, there were cakes in there and treats and all this stuff. And I liked making the dessert. I enjoyed it. And because, you got to eat a little bit too. There was never any limit. In some jobs when you eat, they say, oh, you can't only have so much. It's like this one, we were allowed to eat a plate of food if we wanted to. And they never said, like, don't eat more than this much. There was no limit put on it. As far as you could just eat, And that's always enjoyable. Whenever you have a job where you get to eat as much as you like, it's something that, you can get put on a lot of pounds at a job like that. There were in Dallas people who did and do, and why are chefs noted for being plump? It's the kind of job. So again, this idea of being in a particular mode of being, that you can be held in by circumstances, like I was talking about the wheel ruts. Or you can just I'm comfortable with what I do. I'm comfortable in my circumstances. I like my current situation. That was Ephraim, Israel. They liked their situation. They're like, I like this. We're blessed. And not only that, I'm blessed. I commit adultery. I commit fornicate. I can go out and fornicate. It's like in America, we're very content. We can play our video games. We can sit around and watch our Netflix. We can do all these things. We like it. And we can commit all kinds of abominations, and there's no consequences. You just sit and look at porn all day, or play video games and look at porn, or whatever. I can get drunk. I can do drugs. I can do all these things. All these things are available, and we like to have it so. I'm just throwing out all the the excesses of man. And women have their excesses too. I'll sit around and watch soap operas all day. We like the easy yoke. But I passed over upon her fair neck. It's easy work. It's not the hardest part of the job. It's a lot worse to be a plow horse than to tread out the corn. It's not a lot of it's work, but it's easy work. And also you get to eat all you want if you're an ox. She loves to tread out the corn. She gets to eat and work. It's not that heavy. I mean, it's work. All of life is work. You know what I mean? A lot of people like to work hard and play hard. It's not that they sit around and do nothing. They work, and then they have their pleasures and their sins and all that. But I passed over upon her fair neck. Her neck, not you. Because the yoke is easy. Isn't that what Jesus said? My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Come unto me, all you that are laden and heavy labored, or all you that labor are heavy laden. I will make Ephraim to ride. Judah shall plow. I'm going to make them do some serious work. I'm going to get them out of their little rut that they're in. They're used to this certain way of easy labor. But I'm going to make them ride. I'm going to make them plow. I'm going to make him break up the clods, What's interesting about the translation of that 2 furrows thing, what are the 2 sins? Is it the 2 golden calves? I feel like there was a place where it said 2 sins. Like you've set up idols and you've forgotten about me. I don't know. Something I probably should have thought about. Well, I was thinking about 2. I was more concerned about the furrows than about the 2. But it would be either the 2 golden calves, or the idolatry and the neglect. The fact that they not only did they go after idols, but they were not thankful to the Lord. They attributed all his blessings to the idols. I don't know. I don't think it's that important. But I guess the reason the furrows got dragged in was because of this continuation. I thought it made sense together, and I thought it did in a sense. Instead of getting bound up in 2 furrows, he's going to break his claw. He's going to break loose. I'm going to make him do some serious work. Seriously work him. And the purpose of this is chastisement. No more easy times for you. We can get in a certain mode of living that we are in a rut. We are used to a certain way. A heifer that is taught and loves to tread the corn, she just heads right over there. It's like you barely have to lead her. Used to a certain way. I don't have to lead her there. She just walks over to the harness herself. Let's go. Let's do it. She likes to tread out the corn. But I passed over her fair neck. Meaning, like I looked, and I passed over me. I put my harness upon her. I made her ride. I made her plow. He's going to break up the fallow ground. You know what I mean? Like the ground. The idea is like that. Apart from the furrows, let's drop that. But the fallow idea is like you plow to break up the ground. It gets tamped down, becomes hard. You got to plow it up so you can plant seeds. You got to turn the soil. And the purpose of turning the soil is so that you can plant afresh. And sow to yourselves in righteousness. Reap in mercy. Break up your fallow ground. For it is time to seek the Lord till he come and rain righteousness upon you. It's the idea. Sow to yourselves in righteousness. We start off this chapter, Jacob feeds himself. He's a vine in the wilderness, bringing forth fruit unto himself. But God is saying now, we're going to change. This is not, and that's kind of like the idea of the ox plowing the corn or treading the corn. It's just going in a circle, towing the grindstone around, and eating as she pleases. She's going around. That's another idea. Like if you're thinking about a grinding, you go round and round and round and round. You never go anywhere. I mean, it's work, but it's wholly the expected. You know what I mean? There's no like difficult places. It's a lot different plowing than going around on a grinding wheel. Around and around and around. The resistance is pretty much uniform. Once they're trained to it, they get used to it. It's not hard work. They even like it because they get to eat all they want. But here he's saying, no. Let's break up what we're accustomed to so that we can sow something fresh. Righteousness. Sow to yourselves in righteousness, reap in mercy. We want God's mercy. And to do that, we must sow the seeds of righteousness. The seed, Jesus uses this analogy in the gospel when he uses the parable of the sower, right? The sower sows the word, the gospel of the kingdom, right? It enters into our hearts. So, and the idea is that it only brings forth when it falls on the good ground. Some seed falls among thorns. The thorns choke the word. And the thorns are likened to the cares of this life, the deceitfulness of riches. The path. The path it doesn't get plowed. It's a place that gets walked on. And the birds come down and steal away the word that is sown in their heart. And there was a stony ground also, which is they don't have depth of root. So when the sun comes out, it shrivels away and it's unfruitful, even though they immediately received it with joy. The gospel of the kingdom says what? What was the gospel preached? The first thing they preached, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. You need to change your ways because God's kingdom is coming. God's kingdom is a righteous kingdom. What is the gospel as far as what is it we tell people? Jesus died for you. He died for your sins that you might be forgiven. Why is that important? Because you need to be righteous. Because God is a righteous God. He doesn't accept sinners. Righteousness is not, so the gospel being sown in your heart, the gospel being preached sows righteousness. It sows the value of righteousness. Righteousness is the fruit, is of the fruit we bring forth. It's not the only thing. But I mean, if I looked at like say just something like specific, like the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long-suffering, loving kindness, mercy, faith, whatever. I may have missed a few there. I don't memorize lists anymore. Love, joy, peace. I remember that starts off, but those are righteous things. You know what I mean? Righteous things. The gospel, the things that are sown in us are righteous things. Not just, a lot of times people think of righteousness as just like not breaking the law. But in the New Testament, we should have learned that it is not enough, it is not just, thou shalt commit adultery. It's that whoever's lusted in their heart has already committed adultery in their heart. It's a different level of sin, but it's still unacceptable to God. And still puts you in danger. Because God is a God of righteousness, and He hates iniquity. He loves righteousness and hates iniquity. And so if we want to reap the mercy of God, we've got to sow to righteousness, which is, I'm sorry for my sins. I repent of my sins. I turn from my sins. I go to God. Here's how I sow to. I want to reap mercy. So I go to God and say, before my sins get out of control and out of hand or whatever, at any point in your life, it may be different. Sometimes you have to hit bottom first. I'm just saying, as a Christian for 25 years, I lay a little different standard on myself than would a 25-year-old who had just heard of Jesus or is just now thinking about taking it seriously. Something that maybe from their childhood they never really took seriously, or their parents were very nominally religious, right? And then they come and then they start finding the faith, right? I'm going to put a different standard of righteousness on someone who's just starting out than I would on myself, okay? So when I say this, I'm talking about myself. I want to continue to reap the mercy of God. That means I take the gospel seriously. I take the promises of God seriously. I pay serious attention to the things which God has brought to my attention. I give it my serious and I put a conscientious effort into seeking righteousness from God. I'm sowing to it. I don't necessarily have to be, at least in the New Testament, I don't have to be all the righteousness of God, but I need to be sowing to it. You know what I mean? So that I can reap God's mercy. If I sow to sin, I'm going to reap. If I can, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Grace is the mercy of God. Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound the more? Because the more we sin, the more gracious God has to be to forgive us. But that's not a formula we're supposed to take into consideration. We're not supposed to you do that math and it looks like on paper, look at it. If I'm more sinful, God is more merciful. The great mercy of God, isn't that a good thing? Isn't it a good thing? Doesn't God delight in mercy? Isn't it make a beautiful story? When some great sin, he was a sinner. He was a terrible sinner. He was, and then, the light of Christ shine into his life. Doesn't it make a beautiful story? Yes, it does. At least at the beginning. But it's he was a believer for 25 years, a strong believer, taught Bible studies, and he was a sinner. Oh, what a sinner. It's not so, that's not good. That does not make a good story. You know what I mean? After so long a time, we should not be so great sinners. And if we are, it's not, then we need to do something about it. It's like I said, it's sort of like that, if you're a Christian so long, you find yourself still so great a sinner. Well, what was it I said about the, you may feel like you want the mountains to cover you and the hills to fall on you. If you still have a conscience, you probably do. But that's not an option. All you can do now is go forward. And like I said to people, the same thing I say to people, some people think they've committed the unpardonable sin. I've had people write me, I think I've committed the unpardonable sin. And usually what people do to solve that is they say, well, I don't think you did. It's like you won't get anywhere with someone like that. If they think they did it, they're going to keep thinking they did it, and they're going to be doubting your word. They're going to be doubting everything for the rest of their lives, most likely, because they might have done something exceedingly foolish. But I say continue to throw yourself at the mercy of God, because I just don't buy it. You know, like, to me, it's like it's a hyperbole. He was referring to something specific going on right then and there. It's like you being a cute little teenager, and I blaspheme. The Holy Spirit is blah 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 blah, bleepity bloopity blobbity. I blaspheme you. I don't know. I don't mean to mock it or make it minimalized, but I'm saying that you may have foolishly done something that was said to be a grave sin. You know, like if your heart is really moved towards God still, don't let that stop you. You know, Jesus also, like I said, Jesus also said, "He that denies me before men, will I deny before my Father in heaven." And Peter denied him 3 times at the crucifixion. I mean, at a very critical moment. It would have been nice to have somebody sticking by you. Yeah, if I'm getting crucified, and then that's when my loved ones decide to turn their backs on me, well, that sucks. You know what I mean? Why didn't you turn your back on me while I was feeding the 5,000 or something, when I didn't need you? Everyone's turned their back on him at the most critical moments. And that's the thing, is that people will let you down at the critical moments. Of course, because those are the most difficult moments to stick by you. How much time I got? Oh, I'm over. Gee. Okay, that's fine. It continues in the same thought with verse 13. You have plowed wickedness, reaped iniquity. We're going with a lot of these agrarian analogies. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Maybe we can even finish this chapter. Yeah, I think so. We only got a few verses left. Ow. You know this. All right. Anyways, thanks for joining me today. I look forward to continuing Hosea tomorrow with you. We will finish chapter 10, I'm almost certain, and maybe even get into chapter 11.
I cried with my whole heart, hear me. O Lord, I will keep thy statutes. I cried unto thee, save me, and I shall keep thy testimonies. I prevented the dawning of the morning. I cried, I hoped in thy word. Mine eyes prevent the night watches, that I might meditate in thy word. Hear my voice according to thy loving kindness, O Lord. Quicken me according to thy judgment, they draw nigh the